Today on Inquirer, Senate Blue Ribbon Committee recommends filing of charges against officials involved in overpriced procurement of laptops for public school teachers. At the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, President Bongbong Marcos talks about the South China Sea issue as something that keeps him up all night.
Keeps you up at night, keeps you up in the day, keeps you up most of the time.
More price hikes looming, local manufacturers of basic goods and prime commodities ask the Department of Trade and Industry to allow them to raise their prices, citing higher production costs. And Alex Gonzaga apologizes to waiter in viral birthday cake video. Good evening. During a dialogue at the World Economic Forum in Davos, President Bongbong Marcos says the South China Sea dispute keeps him up at night. To tell us more, here's Chona Yu live from Switzerland. Chona?
Yes, Neil, among the issues discussed today during the meeting between President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and World Economic Forum President Jorge Brende was the controversial issue of the South China Sea. During a dialogue with Brende, Marcos was asked if the South China Sea situation keeps him at night, to which he responded that it keeps him up at night, in the day, and most of the time. The president explained that the Philippines is at the very front line in cross-trade tensions between China and the United States. Marcos added that whenever tensions increase, the Philippines is watching as bystanders and would suffer if anything goes wrong. Asked if he brought up the issue during his visit to Beijing earlier this month, Marcos said he did, since there's no way to avoid it. The Philippines and China are at odds over the South China Sea, with Beijing claiming sovereignty over the area despite a ruling by the Permanent Court of Claims have no legal basis. Both
We're losing Chona. Chona? Hello? Okay, we'll go back to Chona Yu for that report. The Senate Blue Ribbon Committee has recommended the recovery of 979 million pesos and the filing of charges against officials involved in the overpriced procurement of laptops for public school teachers. Our Senate reporter, Denisa Fernandez, has the details. Denisa?
Yes, Neil, the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee has recommended the recovery of 979 million pesos in the overpriced procurement of laptops for public school teachers and the filing of cases against executives of the Department of Education or DepEd and the Procurement Service of the Department of Budget and Management or PSDBM who were involved in the laptop procurement mess. The committee secretary, who read the dispositive portions of the 197-page panel report, said that the recovery of the 979 million pesos will be placed in a special National Teachers Trust Fund to support the health and medical needs of public school teachers and the educational needs of their children through a special scholarship program. Criminal and administrative charges are meanwhile recommended to be filed against DepEd and PSDBM officials who were involved in the fiasco. The committee also suggested that civil complaints be initiated to recover the 979 million pesos from concerned DepEd and PSDBM officials. The panel also proposed to abolish the PSDBM and require government departments, agencies, offices, instrumentalities to conduct their own procurement as an exercise of their fiduciary duty to be accountable for public funds appropriated for their respective offices. According to the panel's findings, there is sufficient basis to believe that there was a conspiracy to facilitate and/or generate an overprice, which indicates a manifest partiality, evident bad faith, and/or gross inexcusable neglect on the part of senior officials and staff of the DepEd and the PSDBM. Meanwhile, the report found Education Secretary Leonor Briones not liable on the issue, but the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee admonished her. Tolentino, panel chairperson, noted that the committee report mentioned that Briones may have unwittingly approved the new parameters that increased the price and decreased the number of laptops. When asked about Briones' possible legal liability, Tolentino said that there is none based on evidence. Aside from Briones, the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee also admonished former DepEd official Marcelo Bragado for not disclosing any knowledge about the allegedly anomalous gadget purchase. The Commission on Audit or COA earlier flagged DepEd's laptop procurement through the PSDBM as overpriced and outdated.
Denise, I understand you already mentioned that the Senate committee did not find any liability with regard to the involvement of Secretary Leonor Briones, but as the head of the agency, shouldn't there be any kind of a liability or just to some degree?
Neil, as explained by Tolentino, former Secretary Briones was just used. Based on the committee report, former DepEd Undersecretary Elaine Pascua recommended to Briones the approval of a new set of parameters for the approved budget for the contract. The report said, and we quote, "In the said purchase request, he cleverly disguised the reduced numbers of units by breaking the number down in lots without providing a total and stated the aggregate estimated cost without specifying the increased unit cost, though the column heading clearly required a unit cost and not aggregate." End quote. For the Blue Ribbon Committee, the move was clearly a ploy to downplay the adjustments, which would have alerted Secretary Briones to direct a full review of the supporting documents, seek further advice, and or withhold approval.
So Denise, what happens next? Who's going to, because right now, as I understand it, this is just a committee recommendation. This is just a recommendation from the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee. So who's going to file the charges, the administrative charges? Who can file the administrative charges and where can it be filed?
Neil, the committee report will be transmitted to the Senate plenary for discussion and approval. Charges may be filed against the erring government officials by concerned entities, but the Senate is only recommendatory.
Have we heard any response from the officials who were recommended to be charged for their involvement in this case?
Neil, so far the officials who are recommended to be charged with cases still have not issued any statements on the matter.
Okay, thank you, Denise. That's Denise Fernandez reporting live. We'll return to Chona Yu for our story regarding the meeting between President Ferdinand Marcos in Switzerland. Chona, are you there? Chona, can you hear me? Hello, Chona? Okay, it seems that we're still having some technical difficulty from Switzerland. We'll return to Chona Yu, who's currently in Switzerland covering President Ferdinand Marcos' attendance at the World Economic Forum. Local manufacturers of basic goods and prime commodities have asked the Department of Trade and Industry to allow them to raise their prices, citing higher production costs. According to Trade Undersecretary Ruth Castello, head of the DTI's Consumer Protection Group, the requests for price hikes were understudy, with the figures presented by local manufacturers being validated. Castello added that the DTI originally intended to release an updated suggested retail price bulletin this month. According to her, local manufacturers had cited several factors that were affecting their production costs, such as the price of raw materials, the cost of logistics, and imported packaging materials. The price hike requests came from local manufacturers of basic goods such as canned sardines, processed milk, coffee, instant noodles, bread, candles, as well as prime commodities like detergent and bath soap. The Department of Information and Communications Technology is setting up one-stop shops in remote areas, allowing subscribers to secure valid IDs required for the SIM card registration. Information and Communications Technology Undersecretary Ana May Lamentillo said that they had asked the Department of Justice to place boots in remote areas where the public could obtain National Bureau of Investigation clearances. She said this could solve the problem of lack of valid government-issued IDs. The private sector has raised the need to speed up the issuance of the national ID to support the SIM card registration initiative. Lamentillo asked the necessity of these requirements in order to prevent those who want to perpetrate crimes by taking advantage of the anonymity of SIMs. The DICT is now working with other government agencies, including the National Telecommunications Commission and the Department of Interior and Local Government, in finalizing the guidelines for the facilitation of SIM registration in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. As of January 16, NTC data showed that 21.13 million SIM cards have already been registered. Existing mobile subscribers have until April 26 to comply with the measure to avoid the deactivation of their SIM cards. We'll check in once again with Chona Yu, who's live from Switzerland. Chona, are you there? Hello, Chona?
Yes, Neil, among the issues discussed today during the meeting between President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and World Economic Forum President Jorge Brende was the controversial issue of the South China Sea. During a dialogue with Brende, Marcos was asked if the South China Sea situation keeps him up at night, to which he responded that it keeps him up at night in the day and most of the time. The president explained that the Philippines is at the very front line in cross-trade tensions between China and the United States. Marcos added that whenever tensions increase, the Philippines is watching as bystanders and would suffer if anything goes wrong. Asked if he brought up the issue during his visit to Beijing earlier this month, Marcos said he did, since there's no way to avoid it. The Philippines and China are at odds over the South China Sea, with Beijing claiming sovereignty over the area despite a ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague that its claims have no legal basis. Both countries have reached a consensus on the peaceful resolution of South China Sea disputes after Marcos and Xi held an in-depth and candid discussion during the former's state visit to Beijing. During the dialogue at the World Economic Forum, Marcos also mentioned how the survival of his family was a motivation for his participation in Philippine politics. He also described their exile as dark days for the family and even the country. According to him, he initially did not want to go into politics as he had witnessed the difficult life in politics through his father, the late former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. But he said there was a need to defend ourselves politically, thus he ran for congressman in Ilocos Norte after returning to the Philippines from exile in the United States. Meanwhile, the World Economic Forum sees the Philippines as an economic outperformer in Southeast Asia, a rarity at this time when most parts of the world are heading into recession. The Philippine government expects full year 2022 gross domestic product growth rate to exceed its target range of 6.5 to 7.5%, while Marcos has expressed optimism that growth rate this 2023 would remain robust at 7%. Marcos noted that the country was currently enjoying a demographic sweet spot, referring to the few dependents. Neil.
Chona, so the issue of the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea was brought up by the WEF itself. Has the WEF mentioned anything, maybe a suggestion as to how the Philippine government must handle the West Philippine Sea issue? Because I'm saying this because the fact that the WEF brought it up means they see it not just a territorial issue, they see it not just as a territorial issue, but as an economic issue as well. So how is the Marcos administration planning to handle this issue? Chona?
Mm. Neil, ang sabi ni Presidente Marcos, yung kanyang foreign policy ay kaibigan ng lahat ng bansa at walang kaaway. Pero yung kanyang pagtitiyak ay nakaangkla yung kanyang foreign policy sa pangangalaga sa interes ng bawat Filipino at sa kanyang mga naunang pahayag ay sinabi niya noon na wala siyang isusuko na kahit na isang square inch ng teritoryo ng Pilipinas. At sabi nga niya, pero yung issue dito sa diplomatic o South China Sea ay isa itong diplomatic language, pero hindi naman maaring isantabi itong issue na ito dahil kailangan na depensahan yung Pilipinas. Hindi lamang kasi ito usapin sa seguridad at teritoryo, kundi maging ng kabuhayan ng bawat Filipino.
Chona, pwede mo rin bang i-elaborate yung nabanggit ni President Marcos na based on this report, I quote, survival of his family was a motivation for his participation in Philippine politics. Ano ibig sabihin ni Pangulong Marcos when he said that?
Neil, doon sa interview, ang kanyang sinasabi, noong 1986 ay patalsik sila dito sa Pilipinas, nagtungo sila sa Amerika at noong 1991, nung bumalik sila dito sa Pilipinas, ang sabi niya matindi talaga yung politika noon, kung kaya isa sa kanila ay dapat na pumasok sa mundo ng politika para madepensahan yung kanyang sarili. Gaya ng mga kabataan noon na nag-edad ng 23, 24, 25, kapag tinanong na kung gusto mo bang pumasok sa politika, ang sagot agad ni Pangulong Marcos ay syempre hindi. Pero sabi nga niya, hindi niya alam yung kanyang kapalaran kung saan siya dadalhin at kaya napasok siya sa mundo ng politika. At ngayong nasa politika na nga siya, ang sabi niya, might as well pagbutihin ko na ito. At gaya nga ng sabi niya, lahat naman ng mga tiniente ay gustong maging general. So yun din yung kanya kung nung tinanong ba siya na kung ikaw ba ay gusto mo rin bang maging presidente.
Okay, maraming salamat, Chona. That's Chona Yu, live from Switzerland. Involuntary hunger among Filipinos saw as a light uptick according to the social weather survey findings released today. The national SWS survey done from December 10 to 14, 2022 said that 11.8% of Filipino families, or an estimated 3 million families, experienced involuntary hunger. This figure was slightly above 11.3%, an estimated 2.89 million families in October 2022. The SWS defines involuntary hunger as being hungry and not having anything to eat at least once in the past 3 months. Alex Gonzaga on Wednesday night apologized to the waiter who she smeared icing cake on during her birthday celebration in Pasig City on January 16. On her Instagram stories, Gonzaga said sorry to the hapless waiter who was identified by her family's publicist as Alan Crisostomo. Gonzaga said the incident had been a lesson in humility and kindness for her. INQUIRER.net tried to reach Crisostomo by phone at his place of work, but an employee claimed that he was not there at the moment. Gonzaga, who is the wife of Lipa, Batangas Councilor Mikey Morada, also asked forgiveness from her family. This is the first time that Gonzaga publicly addressed the issue, although earlier on Wednesday, a publicist of the family came out and claimed that Crisostomo is a friend of the actress's mother, Pinti, and that of the Sorianos. The video was first posted by Danny Barreto, but was deleted. However, several followers have made a copy and re-uploaded it on social media. This drew the ire of netizens, among them celebrities who called Gonzaga out for her rude behavior. And these are the stories you need to know today. I'm Neil Mercado. Follow INQUIRER.net on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. For more stories, visit INQUIRER.net. Good evening.